He had been 32 years old for a few months now, and the life he had built was quiet, steady, and predictable. Every morning he rose before the sun and tended to the fields that had been in his family for generations. The soil was rich and dark, and he took pride in the small crops he could coax from it, though he sometimes wondered if the work itself was filling the emptiness in his heart or merely distracting him from it. The town around him was small and slow to change. People knew each other and news traveled fast, though he often found himself removed from the gossip and chatter. He spoke politely to neighbors, but rarely lingered for long. His father had died when he was young, leaving him to care for the farm, and the responsibility had shaped him into a man of routine and discipline. He had learned early that life could be harsh and unpredictable. Loss and disappointment had taught him to guard his heart and find comfort in the work that needed doing, a barn that needed repair, a fence that had fallen down, a horse that needed feeding. These were the constants he could rely on. He remembered watching other men in town get married and settle down. They would bring their wives to church and sit proudly on Sunday listening to the sermon. Some would have children almost immediately, and he would watch from a distance, imagining the warmth of a family home, but never quite feeling that it was meant for him. In the evenings he would sit by the fire and read from the small collection of books his father had left him, stories of distant places and people who lived lives very different from his own. He often felt a pang of longing for something he could not name, something beyond the fields and the quiet streets of the town. The seasons passed, and with them the rhythm of his days. He rose with the sun and worked until his hands were blistered and sore. Then he returned to his modest home, where he cooked a simple meal and sat in the dim light thinking about what he had accomplished and what he had missed. The quiet sometimes pressed on him, and he would stare out the window at the darkening sky, wondering if he would always be alone. He had a few friends in town, men he had known since childhood. They would meet occasionally at the tavern to talk about the weather, the crops, and the latest happenings, but even among them, he felt a distance, as if there was a part of him that could not be shared. They laughed and joked, and yet he could not bring himself to share the ache that sometimes settled in his chest, though. Townspeople often asked when he would marry, and he would smile politely and shrug. He had no answers for them. He had known love in brief glimpses in his youth, but each time it had ended in disappointment, leaving him more cautious, more hesitant. Each failed affection had built a wall around his heart, and he was careful not to tear it down too quickly. Despite the solitude, he had cultivated a life of small pleasures he enjoyed. The feel of the earth under his hands, the sight of a sunrise over the hills, quiet of the river as it wound through the fields. He took satisfaction in knowing that he could manage on his own, and that the work he did mattered in some small way. He was respected in the town, and he respected himself for the life he had built, even if it was a solitary one. There were moments when the silence felt heavy, when the wind rattled the shutters at night, or when a storm rolled across the hills. He felt the weight of being alone. He would imagine what it might be like to have someone by his side, someone who understood the work and the quiet, who could share the simple joys and the inevitable sorrows of life. But these thoughts he would quickly push aside, preferring the certainty of his routine to the risk of disappointment. The farm required attention through every season. He planted in spring, tended through summer, and harvested in autumn. Each task gave him purpose, and yet there were hours between the labor when the house was still and the fields quiet. He would sit in his chair by the window or walk slowly along the fence lines, listening to the sounds of nature and feeling the absence of another human presence in his life. Winter was the hardest time of all. The snow would fall and cover the fields in a thick white blanket. He would wake before dawn and spend hours breaking ice and feeding animals. The nights were long and cold, and the fire would burn low, leaving the room shadowed and silent. He often thought about the lives of others who had families and warm homes filled with laughter and conversation. He would allow himself a moment of longing before returning to the steady work that defined his existence, though he did not admit it even to himself. He sometimes imagined a life that included more than solitude, a companion to share meals with, a hand to hold during difficult times, someone whose presence would make the days lighter and the nights warmer. But he feared that opening himself to another person could lead to pain and disappointment again, and so he kept his heart carefully guarded in certain afternoons. He would take a walk through the town and watch families going about their business, parents Walking with children in hand, shopkeepers calling out greetings, he observed quietly, noting the small details. The laughter, the gestures, the way people connected, and he felt both admiration and a quiet ache. He was a man of discipline and order, but beneath the surface there was a longing for connection that he did not fully understand yet. He also knew that his life had meaning as it was. The farm thrived under his care. The animals were healthy and well tended. The town respected him for his honesty and hard work. There was stability and security in his days, even if companionship was absent. Nights were filled with the sounds of the wind, the distant call of an owl, and the occasional rustle of animals outside the window. He would sit quietly and sometimes talk to the memories of his parents and the friends he had lost over the years. He found comfort in remembering the past and the lessons he had learned, and in these quiet moments, he would reflect on what the future might hold. He understood that life had a rhythm and a pattern, and that he was part of a larger world, even if he was alone in it. The solitude had taught him resilience, patience, and self-reliance. It had also shown him the importance of observing the world and noticing the small miracles that occurred each day: the first bloom of a flower, the flight of a bird, the pattern of clouds across the sky. Each of these brought a small sense of joy that kept the loneliness at bay as spring approached again. He prepared the fields for planting once more. He rose with the sun and worked until the earth was ready to receive the seeds. Each movement was purposeful and meditative, and yet he felt the quiet tug of longing in the back of his mind. He wondered if the pattern of his life would continue in this way indefinitely, or if perhaps fate had something unexpected in store. For him, evenings were spent in reflection. He would sit by the fire and think of the past and the choices that had led him to this point in life. He felt a sense of gratitude for the skills he had developed, the independence he had earned, and the simple joys he could find in everyday life. Yet the ache of solitude remained a constant companion, a reminder that there was more to life than work and routine. Though he did not realize it at the time, his life was on the cusp of change. An encounter was waiting in the near future, something that would stir emotions and challenge the quiet certainty he had built around himself. For now, he continued with his routine, tending to the farm and observing the world around him, finding small joys in the details and preparing himself unknowingly for a shift that would alter the course of his life. One morning, as he walked into town to deliver some of his harvest, he noticed a woman standing by the market stall. Her clothes were simple and worn, but she carried herself with a quiet dignity. She was speaking to the merchant in low tones, and he could see the weight of care in her eyes. She had a small child clinging to her side, and he observed how she held the little one protectively. He did not approach her at first, preferring to keep to himself, but he could not help noticing how she moved with a mix of weariness and strength. There was something about the way she handled her responsibilities and the quiet sadness in her expression that drew his attention. As he lingered nearby, he saw her attempt to lift a basket that was too heavy for her. The child was struggling to keep up, and she looked around for help. He stepped forward without a word and offered to carry the basket for her. She hesitated for a moment, then nodded gratefully, and he lifted the basket icily. They walked together to her home at the edge of town. She had a small plot of land and a modest home that needed repair. He noticed the broken fence and the roof that had a few missing shingles. He realized that she was doing her best to manage alone and felt a sense of admiration for her perseverance. He offered to help with repairs or chores, and she looked at him with surprise and some hesitation. After a short pause, she accepted, and he spent the afternoon mending the fence and fixing the roof, while the child watched and asked questions about the tools and the work. As they worked, he began to learn a little about her story. She had been married for several years, but her husband had died, suddenly leaving her to care for the child and manage the home. She spoke quietly and without complaint, but he could sense the sadness beneath her calm exterior. She had learned to be self-sufficient and proud, but there was a vulnerability that he could not ignore. They spent time together over the following weeks. She would meet him at the edge of town to ask for help with repairs or tending the garden, and he would arrive and offer his assistance without expecting anything in return. Slowly, a rhythm developed between them, built on shared labor and quiet companionship. He noticed how her eyes lit up when she spoke of her child and how carefully she planned each day to keep life moving smoothly. The child warmed to him quickly, asking questions and seeking his company. He found himself looking forward to their visits and the small moments of connection they shared. One afternoon, as he was leaving her home after helping with chores, she offered him a cup of tea. They sat on the porch in the shade and spoke quietly about the town, the weather, and the small pleasures of life. There was no rush, no pressure, only the simple comfort of shared presence. He began to realize that he felt a sense of ease with her that he had not felt with anyone in years. There was a natural understanding between them, a sense that they could rely on each other without words. She did not ask for anything beyond his help, and he did not expect more than her company. The child often played nearby while they spoke. She would occasionally ask him to show her how to hammer a nail or pull weeds from the garden, and he patiently guided her hands. He found joy in these small interactions and felt a growing bond with both mother and child. People in the town began to notice their association, and some whispered about the possibility of a deeper connection. They were careful not to draw attention to themselves, preferring the quiet of work and conversation. He sensed their curiosity, but chose to ignore it, focusing instead on the relationship that was forming as the weeks turned into months. He found himself thinking about her during his walks through the fields and the long evenings by the fire. He wondered what her thoughts were when she was alone and whether she felt the same quiet anticipation that he did. Their encounters had become the highlight of his days, and he began to consider how different his life might be if this connection continued to grow. She shared small stories about her life before she had become a widow, how she had dreamed of children and a home full of laughter, how she had learned to manage grief and find strength in daily routines. He listened and offered understanding and support without judgment, and in return she began to trust him more openly. The rhythm of their interactions became comforting and familiar. He would arrive at her home with tools and supplies, and together they would accomplish tasks that she could not have done alone. The work was steady and meaningful, and in the midst of it they found moments of laughter and light conversation. He began to notice the little details about her, the way her hair caught the sunlight, how her hands moved with careful precision, and the subtle expressions that revealed her thoughts without words. He felt a growing admiration for her strength and resilience, and also a quiet longing to be closer. One day, a storm approached while he was at her home. They worked quickly to secure the garden and the animals. He could see the tension in her eyes as the wind began to pick up and the sky darkened. He suggested they wait out the worst of the storm inside. She agreed. They sat by the window listening to the rain and the distant thunder. The child curled up beside her, and she rested her hand gently on his shoulder as they watched the storm pass. They spoke quietly about the unpredictability of life and how it forced them to rely on each other. He felt a profound sense of connection and trust in that moment. Over time they shared more of themselves. He told her of his childhood and the lessons his father had taught him about hard work and integrity. She spoke of her hopes for the future and the desire to create a safe and nurturing home for her child. They did not rush the sharing, but allowed it to unfold naturally with the rhythm of their meetings and shared labor. The trust and understanding between them deepened. They began to anticipate each other's needs and offered help without waiting to be asked. Their connection was quiet and steady, built on shared experiences and mutual respect. Though there were moments of hesitation and doubt, he could sense that they were both feeling something that went beyond simple friendship. The bond was subtle and often expressed through small gestures, a shared look, a quiet word, an unspoken understanding of each other's burdens and hopes. People in the town continued to watch and comment, but he paid little attention, preferring the authenticity of the moments spent with her. He found satisfaction in knowing that he could be of help and that she welcomed his presence as much as he valued hers. As winter approached once more, he realized that the relationship had become an important part of his life. The quiet companionship had brought warmth and meaning to days that had once been defined by solitude. The child now called him by a friendly name and often ran to greet him when he arrived at the gate. He began to imagine the possibilities of a future with them. Though he did not rush the thoughts or speak them aloud, he understood that their connection needed time to grow, and that the strength of trust and friendship was the foundation for anything more. Each visit left him with a sense of fulfillment and anticipation. He would walk home at dusk feeling the quiet joy of the shared day and the knowledge that he had made a difference in their lives. As he looked up at the sky, he felt a faint sense of hope that life could hold unexpected turns that might bring companionship and love to a life once defined by solitude. The days continued to pass in a steady rhythm of work and shared moments. The bond between them grew with each task accomplished and each quiet conversation. Their connection remained unspoken in terms of romance, but it carried a weight of possibility that neither could ignore. He found himself looking forward to the next visit to see her and the child, to offer help and to share the simple pleasures of the day. He began to see life as something that could be richer and fuller than he had imagined before the chance encounter at the market. Though cautious, he allowed himself to feel the warmth of connection and to enjoy the small joys of companionship. Without fear of disappointment, they had begun to navigate the delicate path from strangers to trusted companions, and the journey had brought new meaning to his life. As spring returned, the farm and town began to come alive once more. He noticed how the earth responded to the warmer days and longer light. The crops he tended grew steadily, and he took satisfaction in the predictable rhythm of sowing and nurturing. The visits to the widow's home became more frequent as the weather allowed. Easier travel and lighter chores, the bond they had formed over the winter had deepened into something that felt natural and unforced. Each visit brought with it small moments of learning and connection. He helped plant vegetables and flowers in her garden, and in return, she showed him how to care for delicate seedlings and conserve water during the dry spells. The child had grown more confident and inquisitive, asking questions about the farm, the tools, and the animals. He found himself explaining patiently how to mend a fence or tend to the chickens, and felt a growing sense of pride in the knowledge he was sharing. The child would watch him closely, trying to imitate his actions and laughing when mistakes were made. He had not realized how much joy a young presence could bring to the routine of life. One morning, as he walked to her home, he noticed her struggling to carry water from the well. He rushed forward to help, lifting the heavy buckets with ease. She smiled briefly, though her eyes reflected exhaustion. He carried the water to her home and set the buckets down gently. She thanked him quietly, and he nodded without saying much, allowing the simple act to speak for itself. Over the days they worked side by side, repairing fences, painting walls, and tending the garden. The work was steady and physical, yet it allowed space for conversation and shared laughter. She told stories of her childhood and the games she had played with friends in the town. He shared anecdotes of his youth and the lessons he had learned from his father in the fields. Their connection was subtle but undeniable. There was a comfort in each other's presence that required no elaborate words or gestures. They understood the rhythm of each other's days and anticipated needs before they were spoken. She began to rely on his help in ways that went beyond simple chores, and he found satisfaction in being of assistance. In the evenings, they would sit together after the work was done. Sometimes the child would be nearby, playing quietly or asking questions about the day. They would speak of small matters, the weather, the crops, and occasional town events. But there was an undercurrent of understanding and shared experience that deepened. With every encounter, he began to notice her expressions in a new way. The slight furrow of her brow when concerned about something, the soft smile when she found relief or joy, the gentle tone when speaking to the child. Each detail became familiar and comforting, and he found himself looking forward to seeing them each day. The town people continued to notice their association, though he paid little attention to whispers and gossip. He focused instead on the authenticity of the bond they were forming. The widow seemed to relax in his presence, showing a trust and openness he had rarely encountered. He valued that trust and was careful not to betray it. One afternoon, they were working to repair a section of fence that had been damaged in a recent storm. He explained how to align the posts and secure the planks while she assisted with the tools and measurements. The child played nearby under the watchful eye of both adults. Occasionally, the child would ask for help, and they would guide patiently, allowing small successes to build confidence. As the day progressed, clouds began to gather, signaling an approaching storm. They worked quickly to finish the repair and secured the tools and supplies he suggested they take shelter inside until the worst of the rain passed. She agreed, and they moved indoors, bringing the child with them. They sat quietly near the window, watching the rain fall. He noticed how she held the child close, and how they both seemed calm despite the storm outside. The wind and rain battered the roof. In the garden, but inside, there was a sense of shared security. He realized how much trust had grown between them, and how important their presence had become to each other over. The following weeks, they spent long hours sharing tasks and conversation. Each day brought small insights into each other's character and history. She shared moments of grief and loss, and he listened with patience and understanding. He told her about the quiet struggles of his own life and how he had learned to manage solitude and disappointment. The child continued to bond with him. The laughter and curiosity of the young one added a dimension of warmth and joy that filled the home. He discovered an unexpected tenderness in himself, feeling protective and responsible in a way he had not known possible. The relationship with both mother and child was becoming central to his daily life. The townspeople occasionally remarked on their frequent visits, but he remained focused on the simple acts of help and companionship. He found satisfaction in being needed and in being able to share his skills and knowledge without expectation. Beyond that, there was a growing emotional connection that neither spoke of directly, yet was understood implicitly. Notice subtle changes in himself. He found joy in the simplest gestures: a smile, a look of recognition, a shared laugh. The solitude that had defined his life was giving way to moments of connection that felt fulfilling and real. He began to understand the importance of patience and trust in building meaningful relationships. The widow displayed strength and resilience, yet he could see the moments when fatigue and worry took their toll. She welcomed his help not only because of the practical support, but because of the emotional steadiness he brought to her life. The partnership was unfolding slowly and naturally. One evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon, they sat together after a day of tending the garden. She shared stories of her hopes for the future, and he listened, offering thoughts and encouragement. They did not speak of love or marriage, yet the bond between them was evident in the shared silences and the ease of conversation. The child played quietly nearby, occasionally glancing up for guidance or approval. They both watched and engaged gently, allowing the young one to learn from their example. The presence of the child had softened their interactions, adding warmth and lightness to the steady rhythm of their lives. As the weeks passed, he noticed how deeply he was becoming involved emotionally. He felt concern for her well-being and took pride in the progress they made together in the home and garden. He realized that he was beginning to imagine a future that included both her and the child, a thought that brought both excitement and apprehension. Their connection had become the anchor for the rhythm of his days. The work on the farm and visits to her home provided structure and purpose, yet it was the quiet understanding and mutual reliance that had become most significant. Each small gesture of care built a foundation of trust and companionship that neither had rushed nor forced. He reflected on the change that had come into his life through this unexpected encounter. A life once defined by solitude was now marked by shared labor and gentle connection. He felt gratitude for the moments of understanding and joy and anticipation for the possibilities that might emerge in time. Though unspoken, the emotional bond between them was evident in their actions and attention to one another. They had built a relationship based on shared effort, trust, and subtle understanding. He began to see that life could be richer and more meaningful when shared with those who valued and respected each other. As spring gave way to early summer, the bond between them strengthened. Further, they continued to work together side by side, laughing occasionally, learning from each other, and building trust. The presence of the child added depth and warmth to their lives, and he felt increasingly connected to both. Each visit to her home reinforced the sense of belonging and purpose. He could see the impact of his help and guidance, and it brought satisfaction and quiet pride. The widow's trust and confidence in him provided a sense of fulfillment he had not known in years, and he began to imagine a future filled with shared labor and quiet companionships. Summer had arrived, and the days were long, warm, and bright. He noticed how the sun cast a golden glow over the fields and how the air carried the scent of blossoms and ripening crops, the farm required constant attention, and he was busy with planting, watering, and tending to the animals. Yet there was always anticipation for the visits to the widow's home where they worked together and shared simple joys. One afternoon he arrived to find her struggling with a broken wheelbarrow. She had attempted to transport a heavy load of vegetables and the wheel had collapsed. She looked frustrated and tired, yet determined. He offered to fix it, and together they repaired the wheelbarrow using simple tools and careful hands. The child watched eagerly, asking questions about each step, explained patiently, allowing the child to help in small ways, and praised each effort. She smiled at the child and then at him as they completed the task, and for a moment he felt the quiet satisfaction of shared accomplishment. The weeks passed in a rhythm of work and companionship. They planted a small garden together and watched as the sprouts began to emerge from the soil. They repaired fences, painted walls, and tended to the animals. The work was steady and often tiring, yet it allowed space for conversation, laughter, and understanding. One evening a storm approached quickly, dark clouds gathering in the sky. They worked to secure the animals and protect the garden. He noticed how she moved with care and urgency, ensuring the child was safe and the animals sheltered. The wind picked up and rain began to fall. They sought refuge inside her home, carrying buckets of water and securing the windows. Sitting together as the storm raged outside, they felt a sense of shared security. The child nestled between them, and they watched the rain. The storm seemed less frightening with their presence and support. For each other, he realized how much trust and reliance had grown in the time they had known each other. Over time, they began to share more personal thoughts and feelings. She spoke of her fears for the future and her desire to create a stable home. For her child, he listened without judgment, offering understanding and quiet reassurance. He told her of the years he had spent in solitude, and how he had learned patience, resilience, and the value of steady work. The bond between them was evident in the small details, the way she relaxed when he arrived, how they anticipated each other's needs without words, the comfort of quiet moments shared over simple meals or tasks, the gentle humor they found in minor mistakes or unexpected events. Child continued to grow more confident and playful, asking for guidance and joining in tasks whenever possible. They celebrated small achievements together, planting seeds, harvesting vegetables, and learning simple skills. He felt pride in the child's curiosity and determination, and in the gentle way the widow nurtured and guided. One day, he arrived to help with a particularly difficult repair. The roof of the house had been damaged by a recent storm. She was worried about rain and damage to the home, and he immediately offered assistance. They climbed ladders and worked side by side, ensuring the repairs were secure. The child stayed below, handing tools and observing attentively as they worked. He noticed the strength and determination in her movements. The way she handled the tools and approached each task showed resilience born of necessity. Yet there were moments when she paused, catching her breath or gazing at the sky, and he could see the weariness and worry in her expression. He offered quiet encouragement, and together they completed the tasks. The shared labor strengthened their connection. They moved together, easily understanding unspoken signals and needs. There was an unspoken bond that had grown from trust, respect, and repeated acts of care and support. Their interactions were comfortable and natural, and the warmth between them was becoming more apparent. One evening, after a long day of work, they sat on the porch watching the sun set over the fields. The sky was painted in shades of gold, pink, and lavender, and the air was filled with the sounds of birds and insects. They spoke quietly about the day, the tasks accomplished, and the beauty of the season. He felt a sense of peace and belonging that had been absent from his life for many years. The child played nearby, occasionally calling out for guidance or attention. They responded gently and with patience, offering small instructions and praise. Their interactions were filled with warmth and care, and the bond among the three of them strengthened with each passing day. He began to notice subtle changes in himself. He felt a growing sense of responsibility and protectiveness toward both mother and child. The desire to be present and helpful was accompanied by a quiet affection that he did not yet fully name, but understood instinctively. He valued their trust and the connection that had developed without forcing it. The widow began to express gratitude not only for his help, but for the steady presence he provided. She shared small details of her thoughts and feelings, and he listened attentively, offering support and understanding. Their conversations were often punctuated by silence that felt comfortable and natural. Allowing space for reflection and quiet connection, the townspeople continued to observe their relationship, though he remained focused on the authenticity of his interactions. He knew that the bond he shared with the widow and her child was genuine and rooted in trust and shared effort. Beyond external opinions, the growing connection was meaningful and significant. They encountered small challenges along the way, repairs that took longer than expected, tasks that seemed overwhelming, and moments of fatigue. Yet through these challenges they relied on each other. Their combined efforts brought solutions and a sense of accomplishment that reinforced their partnership and strengthened their emotional bond. Began to imagine a future that included both of them. Without rushing or forcing the thought, he saw the possibility of a life shared in companionship and mutual support, and it filled him with quiet hope that trust and connection that had developed were becoming the foundation for something deeper and more. During one particularly hot afternoon, they took a break from work and sat under the shade of a tree, drinking water and watching the child play. He noticed how she smiled easily in these moments, and how relaxed her posture became. He realized that their shared time had allowed both of them to feel understood and supported in a way that was rare and valuable. The seasons continued to shape their lives, yet the bond between them remained constant. Each visit brought small victories, shared laughter, and deeper understanding. The work was demanding yet fulfilling, and the quiet companionship provided emotional richness that neither had anticipated. They began to rely on each other for more than practical help, offering emotional support and encouragement. They celebrated small successes together and comforted one another in moments of fatigue or worry. The child became an integral part of their interactions, bringing laughter and energy that lightened the daily routine. Through the shared experiences, he found patience and humility. He learned to appreciate the simple moments, the quiet understanding, and the small acts of care that built trust and connection. The widow's strength and resilience inspired him, and he saw in her the qualities he valued most in people. The relationship continued to develop at its own pace, without pressure or expectation. Their bond was strengthened by daily interactions, shared labor, and mutual support. Each day brought new understanding and appreciation for each other's strengths and quiet moments of connection that deepened the sense of belonging and partnership. He recognized that the connection they had was becoming central to his life. The anticipation of visits and the quiet satisfaction of shared work provided meaning and fulfillment. He felt gratitude for the trust and companionship they had built, and began to imagine a future where this connection could grow into something enduring and supportive for all. 3 of them. Autumn arrived with cool, crisp mornings and golden leaves that drifted across the fields. He noticed how the light changed and how the air smelled of harvest and earth. The farm required steady attention as crops were gathered and stored. Yet his thoughts often turned to the widow and her child and the growing connection that had shaped the past months. He arrived one morning carrying supplies for the garden and tools for repair. She was in the yard organizing baskets of produce. The child ran to greet him with laughter and excitement. He felt warmth spread through him as he knelt to greet the child and offered a helping hand with the heavy baskets. They worked together throughout the day, repairing fences, gathering crops, and tending the animals. Each task was approached with care and cooperation. They laughed when mistakes happened and encouraged each other through the difficult moments. The child played nearby, observing and learning under their guidance. Afternoons were often spent resting and talking. They would sit quietly on the porch, sipping water and watching the colors of autumn unfold across the fields. He shared stories from his youth, and she spoke of memories from her life before loss. They listened attentively to each other, and the silence between them felt comfortable and safe. The bond between them had deepened over the months, and he began to realize that his feelings had grown beyond friendship. The thought of life without their presence was unsettling. He noticed how much he cared for her well-being, and the happiness of the child. The quiet affection he felt was steady and enduring, yet he did not rush to name it. One day as they repaired the roof together, he noticed the way she moved with confidence and care. The child helped by handing up small tools, and clumsily imitating their actions, they worked together harmoniously, completing the repairs with a sense of shared achievement. The simple moments of cooperation brought them closer and strengthened trust and understanding. In the evenings, they shared meals and stories. Their conversations covered practical matters and small joys. Yet there was an unspoken understanding that their bond had grown into something more meaningful. Each glance, each gesture carried warmth and care.
How the child
Often asked questions, and they guided patiently, allowing learning and confidence to grow. He began to imagine a future where they were together, not just as companions, but as a family. The thought was both thrilling and comforting. He realized that he wanted to be part of their lives, consistently offering support and sharing daily joys and responsibilities. The town had noticed their closeness, and occasional whispers reached them, but he paid little attention, focusing instead on the authenticity of their connection. The love and trust they shared were built on months of consistent care and support. He understood that external opinion mattered little when the bond was genuine and mutually enriching. One cool morning, they set out together. The last of the harvest, she carried a small basket, and he lifted larger loads. The child ran between them, asking questions about the produce and the work. They laughed together when small mishaps occurred and celebrated the minor victories with shared smiles and gentle encouragement. As the season progressed, the rhythm of daily life continued. The bond between them was steady and deepening. They shared responsibilities and care for the child. They celebrated small successes in the garden and farm, and comforted each other during moments of fatigue or worry. The connection they had built was strong and meaningful. Found himself looking forward to each day spent with them, anticipating shared work and quiet conversation he enjoyed. The small gestures, a smile, a touch, a look that conveyed trust and understanding. He realized that the affection he felt was natural and rooted in genuine respect and appreciation for their strength and character. The child had grown more confident and playful, asking for help and guidance. They responded with patience and encouragement, creating an environment of learning and trust. The small moments of interaction added joy and warmth to the daily routine and strengthened the bond among the three of them. He and the widow began to discuss practical matters for the coming months, sharing thoughts on the farm, the home, and care for the child. Their conversations were calm and thoughtful. They considered solutions together and supported each other in planning and decision-making. The trust between them allowed open communication and understanding. One evening, as the sun set, they sat quietly together on the porch. Watching the child play nearby, they felt a sense of peace and completeness that had been absent from their lives for years. He felt gratitude for the trust they had shared, the work accomplished together, and the quiet companionship that had grown into something enduring. They continued to support each other through challenges, whether repair work, heavy lifting, or managing the daily tasks of life. Their partnership had grown to include both practical assistance and emotional support. Each day, they deepened their understanding of each other's character, values, and strengths, creating a bond that was steady and nurturing. The affection he felt for her and the child had become central to his life. He began to imagine a future where they lived together as a family, sharing work, laughter, and simple joys. He did not rush the thought or speak it aloud, yet it filled him with hope and a sense of purpose that had been absent in previous years. One crisp autumn day, they harvested the last of the vegetables for storage. The child helped carrying small baskets and laughing at the simple task of moving them. He and the widow worked side by side, calmly coordinating each step. They paused occasionally to enjoy the colors and scents of the season and to reflect on the work accomplished. The bond between them had become a source of strength and comfort. Each small act of care and assistance reinforced trust and understanding. They relied on each other naturally and without expectation, creating a steady partnership built on mutual respect and affection. The child thrived in the environment of support and attention. As autumn deepened, the evenings grew cooler, and they would sit together reflecting on the day and plans for the future. They spoke of simple pleasures, the beauty of the seasons, and the small victories of daily life. Their conversations were quiet, yet meaningful, and strengthened the emotional connection between them. He realized that the solitude that had defined his life was no longer necessary. The companionship he had found brought warmth, purpose, and fulfillment. he valued the shared work, the quiet understanding, and the affection that had grown steadily over months of connection. The child often asked questions about the farm, the animals, and the work. They guided patiently, allowing learning and confidence to grow each small interaction. Reinforced their sense of family and belonging, he felt a profound satisfaction in being a source of support and care for both the widow and the child. After noon, they gathered around the garden, reflecting on the changes of the past months. He noticed how their bond had strengthened. Through shared labor, quiet conversation, and mutual support, the affection and trust they shared had become a foundation for something enduring and enduring. They continued to navigate challenges together. Managing repairs, work, and care for the child, each shared task strengthened their connection and allowed moments of laughter and understanding to flourish. The simple routines of life had become rich with meaning and emotional fulfillment. He began to imagine a life where they were together consistently as a family, sharing daily work and joys without fear or hesitation. The trust and affection they had cultivated provided a natural path toward companionship and love he felt gratitude for. The bond that had formed in anticipation for the possibilities ahead. As the harvest season ended, they prepared the farm for winter. Their interactions remained steady, supportive, and caring. They shared work responsibilities, offered encouragement, and celebrated small achievements. The child flourished in the environment of warmth and guidance provided by both adults. He felt a quiet certainty that their lives were now intertwined in ways that would continue into the future. The bond that had grown over months of shared work and understanding had become the foundation for enduring companionship and a family built on trust, care, and will. Quiet love evenings were spent reflecting on the day, the work accomplished, and the joys and challenges faced. They spoke quietly of plans for the coming months and shared hopes for a future that included shared labor, companionship, and the nurturing of the child. The connection between them had matured into a steady, comforting presence that shaped each day. He understood that fate had brought them together in an unexpected way, that the solitude he had once known had been replaced with a meaningful partnership built on trust, understanding, and mutual support. The quiet affection and shared labor had created a life richer and more fulfilling than he had imagined. As the final days of autumn arrived, he walked through the fields thinking of how much life had changed. He felt warmth when he remembered the laughter shared, the quiet moments of understanding, and the small victories achieved together. He knew that this connection had become central to his life and would continue to grow. He looked at the widow and the child and felt a profound sense of belonging and purpose. The life he had once thought would be solitary was now filled with trust, companionship, and love, built slowly through patience, understanding, and shared effort. The future seemed full of possibility and quiet joy as they prepared to face it together. As a family, winter settled over the town, bringing frost to the fields and a sharp chill to the air. He noticed how the landscape had transformed into a quiet world of white and silver. The farm required careful attention as the animals needed warmth, and the crops were stored safely. Yet his thoughts often turned to the widow and her child and the deepening bond that had defined the previous months. He arrived one morning carrying supplies and tools for the home. The widow greeted him with a warm smile, and the child ran ahead laughing. They began their day with simple tasks: clearing snow, securing the roof, and tending to the animals. The work was demanding, yet the shared effort made it lighter and brought moments of laughter and gentle conversation. Over the weeks, they settled into a winter routine. He would rise early to tend the farm and deliver any necessary supplies before visiting them to assist with chores. They repaired small damage from storms and organized the home for the cold days ahead. Each task brought moments of shared cooperation and understanding. The child enjoyed the attention and guidance from both adults. Learning how to feed the animals and help with chores created a sense of responsibility and pride. He and the widow encouraged curiosity and independence, patiently showing the child to complete tasks safely and correctly. Evenings were spent by the fire. They would sit together quietly, sharing thoughts about the day, the work completed, and the changes of the season. The conversations were calm and meaningful, often punctuated by moments of comfortable silence. They shared stories from the past and reflections on life that strengthened their emotional connection, he began to realize how central they had become to his daily life. The quiet companionship had evolved into deep affection and care. He noticed how his thoughts lingered on them when apart, and how he anticipated each moment spent together. Their presence had transformed his formerly solitary routine into one filled with purpose, warmth, and connection. One afternoon, a heavy snowstorm arrived unexpectedly. They worked together to ensure the animals were fed and the home was secure. He noticed her determination and resilience as she moved quickly, yet carefully attending to the child and household needs. He felt admiration and a growing sense of responsibility to support them through challenges. The child watched closely, asking questions and participating in small ways. They guided patiently, celebrating small successes and teaching practical skills. The experience created a sense of accomplishment and deepened the bond among the three of them. He began to imagine the future, more clearly seeing a life where they lived together consistently, sharing work, laughter, and care for each other. The thought brought warmth to his heart and a quiet certainty that companionship and family were now possible and desirable. He valued the trust and affection that had grown steadily over the following weeks. They shared many simple yet meaningful moments. Walking together through the snowy fields, they observed the changes in the landscape. The child would point out tracks or small animals, and they would explain gently. The observations created shared learning and wonder, bringing light and curiosity to the long winter days. He noticed subtle changes in the widow, her ease in his presence, and the quiet trust that had developed. They communicated often, without words, through gestures and shared understanding. Their bond had strengthened to the point where daily life felt richer and more secure in their company. One evening, they shared a simple meal. He watched her laugh gently at a small mistake the child made and felt a deep sense of contentment. The atmosphere was warm and calm, their shared presence creating a sense of family and belonging that neither had experienced before. The snow continued to fall, and they spent many days inside, tending to minor repairs, organizing the home, and planning for the months ahead. The shared effort created a rhythm that was steady and comforting and allowed for quiet reflection and connection. The child grew more confident, enjoying the support and encouragement from both adults. He began to recognize the depth of his feelings for the widow and child. The care and affection he felt were steady and natural. He did not rush to speak of love, yet he understood that the bond was strong enough to form the foundation of a lasting partnership built on trust, respect, and shared effort. Town noticed the closeness of their association, but he paid little attention, preferring the authenticity of the relationship he shared with them. The bond was rooted in daily acts of care, shared labor, and gentle understanding, creating a life that was meaningful and enriching beyond external opinion. They faced challenges together. He helped with difficult tasks in the cold and snow while she managed the household and cared for the child. Their combined effort allowed both to manage and overcome difficulties that might have been overwhelming alone. Each successful day reinforced trust and partnership. He felt a growing sense of purpose in his involvement with them. The quiet moments by the fire, the shared tasks outdoors, and the attention to the child created satisfaction and emotional richness that had been absent in his life before. They were becoming a family in both practice and feeling. The child often asked for guidance in small tasks or stories about the past. They responded patiently and gently, creating an environment of learning and support. The small moments of instruction and encouragement reinforced the sense of care and connection that had developed over months of shared life. They celebrated small joys of the season, the first snowfall on the fields. The discovery of tracks in the snow and the warmth of a shared meal brought comfort and happiness. They reflected on accomplishments and discussed plans for spring work and improvements. Creating shared anticipation and purpose, he began to see the continuity of life with them and the sense of belonging that had become central to his daily existence. He felt gratitude for the bond they had built, the trust and affection that had grown, and the quiet joy of shared work and companionship. The future seemed full of possibilities and hope.